Before you scroll away, just hear this: my husband and my best friend were planning to move in together, into my own damn house. While I folded their laundry, cooked their dinners, and poured their wine, they were laughing in my kitchen, building a life behind my back. But instead of crying, I started plotting. And trust me, what I did next. They never saw it coming. They used to laugh over wine in my kitchen, my husband, Theo, and my best friend, Melissa. That smooth, easy laughter that makes a woman feel grateful for the life she built. Melissa's laugh always rang out like wind chimes, soft, musical, innocent. I used to join in. God, how I used to laugh with them. We were a trio that made sense. Or so I thought. It was a Thursday evening when I first noticed something was off. The wine bottle was half empty when I walked into the living room, but I hadn't even poured my glass yet. Theo and Melissa were on the couch, talking in low voices, his hand just a little too close to hers on the throw pillow. When they saw me, they jolted apart like teenagers caught necking at a school dance. But they laughed it off. And I laughed with them, because what else was I supposed to do? Accuse them of cheating because their knees brushed? I'm Clara Reed. I'm 61 years old. And I thought by now, betrayal wouldn't shake me. I've weathered enough storms, miscarriages, my father's slow death, a business that nearly took everything from us. But nothing prepared me for the truth I discovered 2 weeks later, that my husband and my best friend had built a life behind my back. A second, secret world in the shadows of mine. I was the one who introduced them. Melissa and I met at the art gallery downtown 5 years ago. She was new to town, sweet, widowed. We bonded over grief and red wine, over paintings that reminded us of the people we'd lost. I invited her into every corner of my life: birthday dinners, beach getaways, lazy weekends. She was there the night Theo got promoted. She toasted with us when we paid off the mortgage. I even gave her a spare key for emergencies. Now I realize. I gave her the key to everything. The day I found out was a quiet one. Rain drummed against the windows as I folded laundry upstairs. Theo's phone lit up on the dresser, careless, unlocked. I've never been the type to snoop, but my hands moved before my brain could stop them. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was divine cruelty. A message from Melissa: did you tell her yet? I don't want to keep pretending. I want to move in already. I'm sick of being the side dish. There was no punctuation, no softness. Just blunt betrayal on a glowing screen. My heart didn't break. It fractured slowly, like an old porcelain plate dropped in slow motion. That night, I served them both my best lasagna. I smiled. Poured them wine. Even laughed at Theo's jokes. Melissa sat across from me in the chair I picked out for her at the antique market. She wore my scarf. Ate my food. Betrayed me with the same lips she used to call me sister. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not in front of them. I sat and listened to their laughter, memorizing it, because I would soon silence it forever. They don't know what I know. They think I'm still in the dark, still playing the part of the clueless wife and generous friend. And that's what makes this next part so perfect. Because while they're building their future behind my back, I've already begun building their downfall, right under their noses. The next morning, I stood at the kitchen window stirring sugar into my coffee, watching Melissa unlock my back door like she owned the place. She didn't even knock. She breezed in with her floral tote bag, hair in her signature careless bun, calling out, "Clara? I brought croissants." Like we were still best friends. Like she hadn't texted my husband the night before begging him to move me out of my own home like a piece of old furniture. I smiled. "You're a lifesaver," I said, kissing her cheek. The croissants were warm, flaky, and smelled like betrayal. I bit into mine and wondered if she tasted the guilt. She didn't flinch. She never flinches. They say betrayal comes with a sound. A crack, a gasp, a scream. But mine came with a crunch between my teeth and the soft clink of Theo's wedding ring against his coffee mug. I had already copied the message to myself. I'd taken screenshots, forwarded texts, even synced his cloud while he slept. I wasn't tech-savvy before this, but betrayal makes you resourceful. I watched tutorials at night under the covers like other women watched true crime. Every secret they whispered, I recorded. Every plan they made, I archived. I didn't know exactly how I'd use it yet. But I knew I would. Theo acted like nothing was wrong. He kissed my temple before heading to the gym, telling me he loved me. I almost laughed in his face. The same mouth that kissed Melissa's neck behind the church office where she volunteered was now touching mine. Disgust doesn't even come close. But still, I smiled. Melissa offered to help me redecorate the guest room. She said it could be cute to make it more modern. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Oh? Planning to stay over more often?" She blinked. Just a flicker. I saw the glitch behind her confident grin. "No. I just meant, your house is lovely, Clara. I only meant if, your sister ever visits." I nodded. "Of course. My sister. How thoughtful of you." That night, I pulled out the old black notebook I hadn't touched in years. I used to keep it during my photography days, where I wrote ideas, moods, shots I wanted to capture. Now, it would serve a different purpose, Operation Shatter. I listed everything they'd stolen from me: my trust, my marriage, my home, my time, my identity, and beside each item, I made a column: how to take it back. The house was legally in both our names. But the land? Mine. From my father. I never let Theo touch the deed. That was going to be my leverage. I called a lawyer the next day. A quiet one. The kind who doesn't advertise on billboards or leak information over golf. He was my father's old attorney, and he remembered me. I told him I was considering selling the land behind our house, purely theoretical, of course, and asked about transferring assets quietly. He gave me exactly what I needed: the knowledge of how to shift things behind the scenes without raising alarm. Meanwhile, Melissa sent me a Pinterest board. Guest room ideas for your forever home. The caption said, "Let's make it cozy for visitors." I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I replied, "I love these. Can't wait to see your vision." She sent a heart emoji. That night, I watched them from the upstairs landing. Theo pulled into the driveway late. I heard the back door creak open. Melissa was still here, pretending to fold laundry in the guest room. I heard them whisper. Heard their footsteps. Heard a muffled laugh that used to belong to me. But I didn't cry. I turned on my audio recorder instead. And then I slipped outside, and quietly removed the spare key from under the flower pot. The one she always used. Because soon, Melissa wouldn't be walking into my home again. Not through the back door. Not through the front. Not ever. Melissa once told me that our home was warm but outdated. She said it like a compliment, patting my shoulder as if I were a child clinging to an old doll. That's how she saw me, I think, an aging wife who wouldn't see the affair until she stumbled over it. But I was never naive. Just patient. A week after I removed the spare key, I began a quiet transformation, not just of the house, but of myself. I boxed up old photographs and replaced them with minimalist art. Not for them, but for me. I needed a new atmosphere to think. I needed to peel back the wallpaper, literally and metaphorically, and see what had been hiding underneath. Behind the floral paper in our hallway, I found mold creeping in the corners. It felt symbolic. Beautiful on the surface, rot beneath. Much like my marriage. Theo noticed the changes. Feeling restless again, he asked, watching me strip the wall near the staircase. I shrugged. Just giving the house a new face. I wanted to say, like you did with your lies. Melissa offered to help, of course. She showed up the next day in overalls and gloves, acting like this was some DIY show we were co-hosting. She even brought candles to clear the energy. I nearly gagged. As she scraped paint beside me, she said, "You know, I always thought if I didn't meet you first, I would have married someone just like Theo." I turned slowly and met her eyes. "Is that so?" She smiled. "He's just stable, strong, kind." "Kind?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. She faltered slightly. "You know what I mean." Oh, I knew. I knew all too well. And I knew she had no idea that every time she came over now, I turned on my hidden camera. A tiny one, embedded behind the bookshelf. Another tucked beneath the kitchen cabinet. Audio synced straight to my phone. I even had footage of her whispering, "Soon, this will all be ours," while staring at my favorite painting above the mantel. I planned to use every frame. Later that night, I stood in the attic, flipping through old storage boxes. Theo had no idea I'd kept everything: documents, receipts, even letters from our first years of marriage. That's when I found it, a letter from Theo to Melissa, dated almost 2 years ago. Folded behind a Christmas card. He wrote about how being with her felt like breathing again. He said I had become routine. A task. A dusty painting on a wall. I ran my fingers along the edge of the paper, then burned it. Not out of anger, but because I wouldn't let their fantasy define me. I was no dusty painting. I was the fire behind the frame. That weekend, I invited my niece Claire for lunch. She's a sharp girl, studying law, good with digital forensics. I told her I was writing a short story based on infidelity and needed help researching legal angles. She asked no questions. Just smiled and said, "I'm in." Together, we reviewed everything I'd collected. Photos, texts, voice recordings. Claire's eyes narrowed when she saw the level of manipulation. "You could ruin them with this." I didn't answer. I wasn't ready for ruin yet. I wanted revelation first. I wanted Theo and Melissa to feel the weight of what they'd done. Slowly. Intimately. Like I had. That night, I set a dinner for 3. Candles, wine, roast chicken. The same kind of dinner they'd always enjoyed with me as their third wheel. Except this time, the chicken was dry. The wine was cheap. The candles smelled like vinegar. They both complimented it anyway, trying too hard. "You always set such a nice table," Melissa said, eyes darting nervously. I smiled sweetly. I'd been thinking of hosting a big dinner party. Inviting everyone. Neighbors, family, old friends. "What do you think?" Theo froze mid-sip. "Why the sudden party idea?" "Oh, I just think people should know who we really are," I said, slicing into the chicken. "Don't you?" The silence that followed was thick. Melissa coughed. "That's lovely. You'd make a beautiful hostess." I wanted to laugh. They still thought they were in control. Still thought I was setting the table for them. But really, I was building a stage. And soon, the show would begin. The thing about betrayal is, once you know it's happening, you start to notice all the things you missed before. The glance that lingers too long. The silence after a joke. The way someone's hand pulls away just a second too late. It's like watching your own life from behind a glass wall, close enough to touch, too far to scream. By now, I had perfected 3 faces. One for Theo, warm, adoring, faithful wife. One for Melissa, oblivious best friend who still believed in girlhood bonds. And one for myself, the woman behind the mirror who saw everything, documented everything, and no longer cared about being polite. I started pushing the two of them closer together in subtle ways. When Melissa came over, I'd excuse myself early, head upstairs, fake a headache, or pretend to take a long bath. Sometimes I'd go to the store and leave them alone in the house. It made them bolder. Sloppier. More themselves. I didn't even have to eavesdrop anymore, my recorders did the dirty work. My favorite moment was when Melissa whispered to Theo, "She's practically giving us space. I think she suspects nothing." That sentence alone was worth gold. But suspicion wasn't enough for me. I wanted them to feel hunted. Watched. Unsteady. So, I left small hints. Just crumbs. I printed out the message Melissa had sent Theo, the one about wanting to move in, and slipped it into a book on our coffee table. Not right on top. Just peeking out slightly, like an accidental marker. The next day, I saw it was gone. Neither of them mentioned it. But the shift in their eyes told me they saw it. And now they were wondering, did she see it too? I hosted a tea for the neighborhood ladies that weekend. Melissa came late, looking flustered, her smile overly tight. Theo stayed upstairs, avoiding the crowd. My friends laughed over lemon scones and gossip. And I sat there, pouring tea, acting like the most serene hostess in the world. Until, casually, I said, "You know what I read the other day? They say the person who betrays you the worst is always the one you'd never expect." The table went silent. One of the women tilted her head. "That's true, isn't it?" Melissa smiled too quickly. "Sounds like one of those silly Facebook quotes." "Maybe," I said, staring straight into her eyes. "But sometimes, they hit a little too close to home." That night, I found Melissa's scarf in the guest room again. A different one. Not the one I bought her. This one was red. I picked it up slowly, held it against my cheek, and laughed. They were getting careless. Confident. Like children sneaking candy from a locked drawer. But the drawer was never locked. I was just waiting to see how much they'd steal. The next morning, I made an appointment with a realtor, quietly, under my maiden name. I asked her to run a market valuation on the house, just to explore possibilities. She didn't ask questions. She gave me a number. A big one. Later that day, I sat on the back porch, sipping tea while Theo and Melissa huddled by the fence, pretending to discuss garden renovations. My garden. The one I planted with my own hands while Theo worked late nights I now knew were lies. Melissa laughed, loudly, too loudly, and reached for his hand. I watched the way their fingers brushed, the way he leaned into her. And something inside me finally cracked. Not with rage. Not even with pain. But with absolute clarity. They thought they were building a future. I was building evidence. They thought they were sneaking around me. I was circling them. They thought I'd break. But I was only getting stronger. Because I no longer wanted just revenge. I wanted performance. Exposure. A reckoning so sharp, so public, that neither of them would dare speak my name without shame burning their tongue. And so I wrote invitations. To a dinner party. The one where masks would fall. I've learned that true revenge doesn't roar. It whispers. It's quiet, patient, and calculated. So, I started writing the invitations by hand, each stroke of the pen deliberate, as though I were sealing a secret into the envelope. Every name I wrote was a piece of my history, neighbors who'd seen us as the perfect couple, family members who believed Theo was the man of unshakable integrity, and friends who still called Melissa my sister. They all would be there to watch the truth unravel. Theo walked into the kitchen while I was addressing the last invitation. "What's this?" he asked, peering over my shoulder. "A dinner party," I said, without hesitation. "For everyone we care about. We haven't had one in ages." His brow furrowed. He hated large gatherings. "Why now?" I gave him my best smile. "Why not? We've got the perfect home for it, don't we?" His silence told me he didn't buy it, but he also didn't argue. He'd never argue about appearances. Keeping the image of the perfect couple mattered too much to him, especially with Melissa watching. Speaking of Melissa, she texted me that night, saw the invite. "This will be so fun. Do you want me to help with the menu?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "Of course. Couldn't do it without you." She sent back a smiley face. I imagined her grinning at her phone, smug, believing she was cementing her place in this house. Little did she know, she was volunteering to set the stage for her own exposure. Over the next few days, I let them believe I was oblivious. I let Melissa help plan the menu, as if her touch on my kitchen mattered. We baked, laughed, and even picked out wine together. Every moment, I wanted to scream, to tell her I knew. But I didn't. I just kept recording. One night, Theo came home late again. His shirt smelled faintly of Melissa's perfume, a citrus scent that was too sharp, too familiar. He didn't notice the way I looked at him, didn't see the flicker of my smile as I asked about his long day at the office. He was too busy lying. I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and played back the latest recording from the tiny camera hidden in the kitchen. Melissa's voice filled the room. "She's clueless, Theo. You just need to tell her. It's better if we're honest." "Not yet," Theo replied. "I need her calm before we make any moves. The house, the accounts. I don't want it to get messy." Messy. That was the word he used about the woman who had stood by him through everything. The woman who built this home with her bare hands, who patched his torn suits, who forgave him when his business nearly bankrupted us. I was messy. A loose end. I closed the laptop slowly, like sealing a coffin. The next day, I visited my niece Claire again. She sat across from me at the cafe, sipping her black coffee while I laid out the plan. "This isn't just about catching them," I told her. "This is about ending them." Claire nodded, her sharp eyes glinting with both pity and admiration. "You know, Aunt Clara, I've seen women break from less. But you're terrifyingly calm." "Calm," I said, stirring my tea, "is the deadliest weapon." The night before the dinner party, I couldn't sleep. I walked through every room, touching the walls, the furniture, every memory embedded in these spaces. Tomorrow, these rooms wouldn't just hold memories, they would hold truths too ugly to hide. As I stood in the hallway, I saw Theo's jacket draped over the chair, his phone buzzing in the pocket. A new message from Melissa lit up the screen: "Tomorrow will be perfect. After the guests leave, maybe you should finally tell her. I'm tired of being the secret." Perfect, I thought, smiling in the dark. Perfect indeed. Because tomorrow, Melissa wouldn't be a secret anymore. By 6 o'clock, the house smelled like rosemary and roasted garlic. Soft jazz played from the speakers tucked into the corners of the ceiling, and the table, my table, was set to perfection. White linen napkins, gold-edged plates, crystal glasses that hadn't seen the light in years. If you walked in off the street, you'd think this was a gathering of the happiest people alive. But beneath the flicker of candlelight, secrets sat like uninvited guests. Melissa arrived first. Of course she did. She wore a pale silk dress that skimmed her body just enough to tempt attention. Her perfume hit before she even crossed the threshold, citrus, sharp and smug. "Clara," she said, beaming, "you look radiant." "So did Judas," I wanted to say. Instead, I stepped forward and kissed her cheek. "I couldn't have pulled tonight off without you." "I'm just glad I get to be here," she replied, brushing past me to place the wine she brought on the counter. "This house feels like home, doesn't it?" I turned, measured her, and said gently, "Yes. It does." Guests began to trickle in after that. Laughter bubbled up in the living room, and wine flowed freely. Theo mingled like a seasoned host, shaking hands, laughing a little too loud, glancing toward Melissa more times than he realized. I watched from across the room, sipping my wine slowly, as if I weren't watching the entire room from above like a silent god. At 7:45, I tapped my glass for attention. "If everyone could please find their seats," I said, smiling. "Dinner is ready." The clinking paused. A hush fell. People moved toward the dining room. The table looked like something from a magazine, centered with fresh eucalyptus, tiny flickering candles, and wine glasses glistening like fragile truth. Theo sat at the head of the table. I sat at the other. Melissa, of course, took the seat closest to him. I stood before them all. "Before we eat, I just want to say how grateful I am to be surrounded by people I love." And trust. Melissa raised her glass and toast. To trust. To truth, I said, holding her gaze. Because that's what tonight is really about. I could feel Theo stiffen. The tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Melissa blinked, then smiled again, too quickly. Is something wrong? I shook my head. Not at all. In fact, I have a gift for everyone. I stepped into the hallway and retrieved a small black box from the cabinet. Inside were envelopes, one for each guest. Each sealed with wax. Each labeled with a name. Gasps and curious murmurs filled the room as I passed them out. Open them after dessert, I said. Please. It's something I've been working on for a while. Melissa opened hers early, of course. Her eyes scanned the contents, printed screenshots. Text messages. Dates. Times. Photos. Her face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint into her wine. Theo hadn't opened his yet. He was watching me. Clara, he said slowly, what is this? I walked behind him and rested my hand on his shoulder. It's a thank you, darling. For showing me who my real friends are. Laughter had died. All that remained was the clink of silverware against plates, the rustling of papers, and Melissa's hand shaking slightly in her lap. Theo finally opened his envelope. His eyes moved left to right. Left to right. Left to, he stood up. This is out of line. So is adultery, I said. A neighbor leaned toward another guest and whispered, is this real? Melissa finally spoke. Clara, this is cruel. No, I said, calmly. What you did was cruel. What I'm doing is justice with wine and a roast. I turned to the rest of the guests. I didn't invite you here to eat. I invited you to witness. For years, I let them live in my home, drink my wine, and lie to my face. I smiled through every betrayal. But tonight, I take the house back. The truth back. Me back. People stared. Stunned. Silent. The perfect dinner party had turned into a courtroom, and I was both the judge and the jury. Theo opened his mouth. I raised my hand. Leave. He didn't move. Clara, leave. Now. And take her with you. Melissa tried to speak, but her voice cracked. You don't understand, I understand perfectly. You built a life behind my back. But this house? This table? This name? It was never yours to steal. I watched them gather their coats in silence. Melissa walked out first, eyes down. Theo paused at the door, as if waiting for a last word, a final plea. But I had none. Only the sound of the door clicking shut behind them. After the last guest left, half of them speechless, the other half whispering my name like I'd set fire to the evening, I stood alone in the dining room, surrounded by the wreckage of truth. Crumpled napkins, wine-stained glasses, abandoned desserts. But I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel regret. I felt clean. I had stripped the rot from my walls and let the air in. The phone rang twice that night. Once from Theo. Once from Melissa. I let both go to voicemail. Their words meant nothing to me now. They had built their little empire on lies, and I had kicked the legs out from under it while wearing pearls. The next morning, I woke up early. I opened the curtains. Let light into every corner of the house. For the first time in months, maybe years, I looked at my reflection and didn't see the woman who had been used or discarded. I saw the one who stayed behind. That same day, Theo came by. He had the audacity to bring coffee. From my favorite cafe. Like a peace offering could erase years of deceit. I didn't open the door, I spoke to him through the glass. His face was pale, unsure, the bravado finally drained out of him. Clara, he said, can we talk? We did, I replied. In front of 20 people. Anything else is just cleanup. He sighed. Look. I made mistakes. Big ones. But we can figure this out. This house, our finances, this house is mine, I said, sharper now. The land is in my name. Your things are boxed on the porch. That's all there is to figure out. He didn't argue. Not really. Because deep down, Theo was a coward. He only ever thrived in the shadows of certainty. Once exposed, he withered. Where am I supposed to go? He asked, his voice cracking slightly. I tilted my head. Wherever your mistress goes when she's not playing house in someone else's home. He left. Slowly. Like he thought I'd stop him at the gate. I didn't. That afternoon, I called my lawyer and had him begin the quiet process of removing Theo from every remaining tie to the house. Bank accounts were already being frozen, joint assets split, and the land, God bless my father's foresight, was mine entirely. I also handed over every piece of evidence I'd gathered, not for divorce court, but just in case Theo tried anything slick. If he pushed me legally, I'd push back publicly. But oddly enough, the silence that followed was almost louder than the affair itself. Melissa didn't call again. She didn't show up at the house. No teary apology. No confrontation. Just nothing. Until the flowers arrived. A bouquet of yellow tulips, her favorite. Not mine. With a note that simply read, I never meant to hurt you. I was just tired of being alone. I hope someday you'll understand. I didn't even flinch. I tossed them into the trash without reading the note twice. Alone? She had me. She had Theo. What she wanted was everything that wasn't hers, and now, she had exactly what she deserved, exile. The only person I responded to that week was Claire, my niece. She texted, "You okay?" I replied, "I'm more than okay. I'm in charge." That weekend, I sat in the backyard garden with a glass of wine, not the cheap one they always brought, but the good bottle I'd been saving for a real occasion. I listened to the wind, to the birds, to the absence of footsteps that didn't belong. And for the first time in a long time, the silence felt like mine. I wasn't broken. I was rebuilt. And the woman who walked back into that house wasn't the same one who used to laugh with liars over wine. A week after the dinner party, something strange happened. I woke up and forgot, for exactly 1 second, that I'd been betrayed. The sun was streaming in through the windows, birds were chirping beyond the trees, and my body felt light. I almost turned to Theo's side of the bed to say something. But the sheets were smooth and cold. Empty. And I remembered. But here's the surprising part, the memory didn't hollow me out like it used to. It didn't burn or sting. It just settled. Like an old scar that no longer aches. I took that morning for myself. I ran a bath with lavender oil, played music I used to love before my home turned into a stage for infidelity, and opened the notebook I had once filled with revenge. But now, it wasn't revenge I was writing. It was possibility. I made a list of everything I wanted to do, not for anyone else, not to show anyone anything, but for me. Learn French again. Take that painting class I put off for years. Host art shows in the garden. Sell this house, eventually, on my terms. And most of all, never let someone else narrate my story again. But peace never lasts long when ghosts still have your number. It started with Theo. Again. He texted, "Can we talk in person?" One last time. I stared at the message for an hour. I didn't want closure from him. I didn't need it. But something in me, curiosity, maybe, agreed. We met at the cafe downtown. Neutral ground. He looked older, though it had only been days. His hair was messier, his shirt a little wrinkled. He looked like a man who had no home base anymore. And in a way, he didn't. He started with the usual. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't plan it. It just happened." "No," I said, "it didn't just happen. You watered it. Fed it." hid it, and planned a life out of my bones. He flinched. But I wasn't done. You didn't just betray me with your body. You betrayed me with your future. With the life we built. He nodded, looking down at his hands like they were strangers. She's not who I thought she was, he mumbled. Neither were you, I said quietly. He said Melissa was staying with her sister now. That they weren't speaking. That after the dinner, Melissa accused him of ruining her life. She said I was supposed to handle it better. That I was supposed to protect her. I sipped my coffee. Did she think she was the victim? He laughed bitterly. Apparently, yes. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. This wasn't about enjoying his pain. This was about seeing him without the blinders I wore for too many years. I'm leaving town, he finally said. Starting over somewhere new. I just wanted to say goodbye properly. I nodded. Then say it. He looked up at me, something behind his eyes that used to mean love but now only looked like loss. Goodbye, Clara. I really did love you. I just lost myself. No, I replied. You gave yourself away. There's a difference. And just like that, he was gone. Melissa didn't try to contact me directly again. But I started hearing things. A neighbor mentioned seeing her crying in her car parked outside my house. A mutual friend called and said Melissa told people I set her up, that I made her look worse than she was. I didn't deny it. I didn't correct it. I simply said, the truth always looks like an attack to those who live in lies. I began clearing out the guest room the next day. Not because I needed the space, but because it had held her perfume in the curtains, her hair on the pillow, her betrayal in the air. I opened all the windows. I scrubbed every surface. I turned on loud music and sang while I worked, my voice shaky but free. And then I found it. Tucked behind a drawer in the vanity she used. A photo. A picture of me, Theo, and Melissa, smiling in the garden from last spring. She must have printed it. I stared at it for a long time. I looked so happy. And so blind. I held it over the sink, lit a match, and let it burn, watching the edges curl into ash, letting the smoke carry that old version of myself away. Because the woman in that photo? She no longer lived here. But I did. And I was just getting started. I always imagined freedom would feel loud. Like applause or laughter. Like a plane taking off. But it doesn't. Real freedom is silent. It's the absence of waiting. The absence of asking for permission to breathe in your own house. The day after I burned the photo, I opened the hallway closet and stared at something I hadn't touched in nearly 10 years, my camera bag. Dust clung to the strap, but inside, the lens was still perfect. I had stopped photographing after Theo told me it was a hobby, not a real pursuit. After he joked at dinner parties that I was a frustrated artist with too much time and too many filters. I told myself he was teasing. Now I know better. So I charged the battery, cleaned the lens, and walked outside with it hanging around my neck like armor. My garden was the first subject. The blooms, the soil, the light cutting through the leaves, none of it had changed. Only I had. I uploaded the photos that night and stared at them until my eyes blurred. I was good. I had always been good. It wasn't just a hobby. It was a voice. One I'd been forced to silence. Now, I was learning to speak again. That weekend, I visited a local gallery. I walked in and asked, calmly, if they accepted submissions from community artists. The woman behind the counter gave me a polite smile and said they did. I gave her my name and left a small portfolio. When she asked what made me pick up the camera again, I smiled and said, closure. By Tuesday, she called back and asked if I'd be open to showing a few pieces in their next exhibit. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just nodded, alone in my kitchen, and whispered, yes. But not everything was silent. That same night, a letter arrived in the mailbox. No return address. No postage. Just folded paper in an unsealed envelope. Melissa's handwriting. I unfolded it slowly. She hadn't even bothered with pleasantries. Clara, you may have exposed me, but you also exposed yourself. You looked cruel. Cold. Vengeful. Everyone is talking. No one likes a woman who makes a scene. I hope your little performance was worth it. Because you lost just as much as I did. I read it twice. Then again. The final line stuck in my throat like thorns. You lost just as much as I did. She couldn't have been more wrong. I didn't lose anything that wasn't already rotting. I didn't lose a husband, I lost a liar. I didn't lose a friend, I lost a parasite. I didn't lose my home, I reclaimed it. But her letter gave me something unexpected, confirmation that she was unraveling. She needed me to feel broken because that's the only way she could keep feeling whole. And I refused to play that part. Instead of responding, I framed the letter. Not out of sentimentality, but as a trophy. A reminder that the people who betray you will always try to rewrite the ending. But I held the pen now. The next few days moved quickly. I cleared Theo's final documents from the office, donated old furniture Melissa used to love, and painted over the guest room walls. It was no longer a guest room. It was my new studio. On the wall, I hung my first printed photo from the garden, an iris bloom split by light, sharp in contrast, defiantly beautiful. It was the first time I'd ever displayed my own work in my own house. I stood in the middle of the room, staring at that photo, and whispered out loud, "This is my space now." And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed it. It had been 2 weeks since I framed Melissa's bitter letter and hung my first photo on the wall. My world had quieted, like the stillness after a storm. I spent my mornings in the garden with my camera, my afternoons editing images, and my evenings listening to soft music and sipping wine that tasted better when I wasn't sharing it with liars. But then came the knock. 3 raps. Sharp. Unfamiliar. I wasn't expecting anyone. Claire had already called earlier that day. The neighbors knew I preferred texts. The gallery wasn't due to follow up until Friday. I wiped my hands on a towel and approached the front door slowly, peeking through the peephole. And there he was. Not Theo. Worse. Melissa's ex-husband. Michael. I hadn't seen him in over 5 years. He'd moved out of town after their bitter divorce, retreating from the mess she left behind. I remembered the rumors, Melissa cheating, manipulating bank accounts, turning friends against him. At the time, I defended her. Of course I did. She was my best friend. Now, I wasn't so sure I hadn't been one of her final victims before she moved on to me. I opened the door but kept the screen latched. Michael? He smiled faintly, hands in his jacket pockets. Clara. I hope it's not too strange me showing up like this. It is, I said flatly. So what do you want? He chuckled. You haven't changed much. You have. You look less broken. He nodded. That's because I got away. I hesitated, then unlatched the screen. You'd better come in. He stepped inside slowly, I scanning the room like it was sacred ground. He looked at the walls, the furniture, the air itself. So this is the house Melissa wanted. I raised a brow. Excuse me? Michael sat on the edge of the armchair, Melissa's favorite. She told me once, back when we were still married, that if she had to trade one life for another, she'd want yours. I sat across from him, stunned. Mine? You and Theo. Your garden. Your reputation. The way people admired you. She hated it. And she wanted it. Desperately. She told you that? She told anyone who made the mistake of thinking she had a conscience. The words hit harder than I expected. Somehow, hearing it from someone else, someone she'd already destroyed, made it real in a different way. I wasn't her first theft. I was her latest. I poured us both tea, and for the next hour, we talked. Not about what happened to him. Or what happened to me. But about Melissa. Her patterns. Her need for control. Her charm that worked like a drug, soft at first, and then smothering. She used to call me weak, Michael said, looking down at his hands. Because I didn't play her games. And when I left, she told people I was abusive. That I left her with nothing. She told me that too, I whispered. Said you ruined her. He looked up, half smiling. She always plants the seed early. We talked until the sun dipped low behind the trees. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the only one who saw her mask crack. As Michael got up to leave, he paused at the door. You know, I think she's afraid of you now. I tilted my head. Why? Because you did what no one else could. You made people see her. He walked out into the dusk, and I stood at the door for a long time after he left, watching the fading light settle over the lawn. That night, I sat in my studio and opened a new folder on my laptop. I titled it, Women Who Reclaimed Themselves. And I started writing my story, not just in photographs now, but in words. Because if Melissa's greatest weapon was hiding behind lies, then my greatest weapon would be telling the truth. I never meant for the story to go beyond me. It started as a journal entry. Then a paragraph. Then a series of essays, each one stitched with pain and clarity, chronicling the before, the betrayal, and the woman I had become afterward. I saved them in a folder on my laptop, not for an audience, but for myself. Until Claire read them. She'd come over with a bottle of wine and a grin, ready to celebrate the gallery, confirming they'd chosen 2 of my photos for their upcoming Women in Light exhibit. She asked if she could peek at my writing, just a few pieces. I hesitated. Sharing my photography felt safe. My words? Those were closer to blood. But I let her read one, the one about the dinner party. The silence afterward. The calm that came not from revenge, but from release. By the time she finished, she was crying. You have to let people read this, she said. I wrote it for me, I told her. Exactly. And every woman who's ever been betrayed and blamed herself needs to read it too. I didn't say yes that night. But I didn't say no either. 3 days later, she emailed me a link to an online magazine. One of those honest, soul-bearing platforms for women reclaiming their narratives. She'd sent my essay to the editor without asking. Bold. Risky. Very Claire. I should have been furious. But instead, I clicked the link. And there it was. My story. Titled simply, The Dinner I Served with a Side of Truth. By morning, it had over 1,000 shares. By the end of the week, 10,000. Women left comments like open wounds, I served him wine too. And he drained me dry. You just told my story. Only difference is, I never got to expose her. God, thank you. I thought I was crazy. I cried. For every woman who had swallowed betrayal with a smile. For every woman who had doubted her own eyes, her own gut, her own worth. And I cried for the woman I used to be, the one who served tea to the woman sleeping with her husband. I didn't expect the phone call. It came on a Thursday afternoon. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Clara? This is Fiona Leeds, I'm a producer with Woven Lives Network. We read your essay and, well, I'd love to talk about the possibility of a segment on our series Second Act Women. You're exactly the voice we've been looking for. I listened to the message twice. Then a third time. I didn't call back. Not right away. I needed to sit with it. Later that evening, I went for a walk through the neighborhood. The same sidewalks I used to travel with Theo. The same streets where people waved at us like we were picture perfect. Now, when people saw me, the waves were slower. Kinder. Curious, even. Some avoided my eyes altogether. But others looked at me like they wanted to say something. When I got back to the house, there was a letter in the mailbox. Handwritten. No envelope. Just folded and tucked between junk mail. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Melissa. It read, "You're embarrassing yourself now. This isn't strength, it's obsession. You ruined 2 lives. Is that really something to be proud of?" I sat down on the porch bench. Held the note in both hands. Then I tore it in half. Then in quarters. Then let the pieces fly into the wind. I didn't need her permission. Not to heal. Not to speak. Not to become something after. That night, I opened the notebook again. Not the old one, the new one. On the first page, I wrote, "Let me tell you what happens when a woman stops pretending." It was a rainy Saturday. The kind where you expect quiet, a warm mug, a book in your lap. I had just finished submitting a new photo series to the gallery, portraits of weathered hands, aged faces, the kinds of subjects no one celebrates but everyone should. I was feeling calm. Grateful, even. Then I heard the knock. Not like before, this one was hesitant. Tapping, then silence. Then tapping again. I knew it before I opened the door. Call it instinct. Or just the inevitable. Melissa. She stood on the porch in a beige coat, soaked through, her mascara smudged in elegant streaks. Her once carefully constructed face, always the right smile, the perfect contour, was undone. For the first time, she looked human. But I didn't mistake that for remorse. "Can we talk?" she asked. I leaned on the doorframe. "You've said enough. Please, Clara. Just 5 minutes." I could have said no. I should have said no. But something in me needed this too. Not for closure. For confirmation. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, as if stepping into a museum of her own guilt. Her eyes scanned the house, same walls, same furniture, but colder now. Unwelcoming. I didn't offer tea. I didn't ask her to sit. She sat anyway. "I've lost everything," she began. "Theo's gone. My job suspended me, someone sent them a link to your article." "Wasn't me," I said. "But I don't blame whoever did." She laughed bitterly. "Of course you don't. You made a meal of me. And they all licked the plate clean." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny. I remember serving you dinner in this house more times than I can count. Free meals. Free wine. Free love. You took everything, Melissa. And now you're mad that there's nothing left." "I loved him," she said, voice trembling. "No, you wanted him," I replied. "The way you want things you think you deserve. But love? Love requires loyalty. Sacrifice. Integrity. You don't even have a whisper of that." Her hands tightened in her lap. "You think you're so clean in all this?" "No," I said softly. "I think I let you too close for too long. That's not clean. That's foolish." She looked away, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. Not because she was strong, but because she never did tears unless they bought her something. She whispered, "I just thought I could have something of my own for once." "You could have," I said. "If you hadn't tried to take someone else's." Silence filled the room. It was loud. Dense. She finally stood. "I came to apologize. I really did. But I don't think it matters anymore." "You're right," I said. "It doesn't." As she reached for the door, I added one last thing. "Melissa?" She turned. "You were never the worst part of this. The worst part was that I believed you were family. And that's something you'll never have again." She didn't respond. She just walked out into the rain without an umbrella. I watched her go. She didn't look back. And I didn't close the door for a long time. Not because I missed her. but because I wanted the rain to wash every last trace of her out of my house. That night, I sat down at my desk and wrote another piece for the magazine, this one titled, "What to Say When the Woman Who Betrayed You Asks for Forgiveness." And the answer was simple. You don't say anything. You just live better. The day after Melissa walked out for the last time, I cleaned the house again, not because it was dirty, but because I needed to feel my hands on something real. Grief leaves residue in strange places: doorknobs, chair arms, coffee mugs. It lingers, like perfume clinging to old sweaters. By late afternoon, I had finally collapsed on the couch when the phone rang again. This time, I picked up. "Clara Reed?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is Fiona Leeds from Woven Lives Network. I left a message last week. I just wanted to reach out again personally. Your essay, it hasn't stopped circulating. Our producers are very interested in interviewing you on camera. We believe your story is going to help women across the country. Honestly, around the world." I was quiet. Not from nerves, just from disbelief. "I'm not a speaker," I said softly. "I'm not a celebrity or an expert." "Exactly," Fiona said. "You're a real woman who lived through something many are still too afraid to admit is happening to them. That makes you more powerful than any expert." I didn't say yes. Not yet. But I didn't say no either. That night, I sat in my studio, staring at the print of the iris bloom, the first photo I had framed after Theo left. I thought of how long I'd lived in other people's shadows. How many smiles I'd faked. How many times I'd swallowed silence just to keep the peace in rooms built on secrets. What would happen if I stood up now? What would happen if I told my story out loud, not just to a magazine, but on a stage, with lights, cameras, millions watching? Was I ready for that? I called Claire. She picked up immediately. "Are you okay?" "I got a call from that TV producer again," I said. "They want me to do a segment." Claire didn't hesitate. "Then do it." "I don't want to look like I'm capitalizing on pain," I said. "You're not," she replied. "You're transforming it. You didn't ask to be betrayed. But now you have a choice about what to do with it. You can bury it, or you can build something out of it." I sat in silence for a moment. What if people judge me? What if they say I overreacted? Claire's voice was calm. "Then they weren't listening. The ones who need you will hear you loud and clear." I thanked her and hung up. And the next morning, I called Fiona back. "I'll do it," I said. "On one condition." "Name it." "I tell it my way. No dramatics. No edits. Just the truth." There was a pause. "Then, that's exactly what we want." The following week passed in a blur of arrangements. Wardrobe consults. Questions from producers. Camera tests over Zoom. I kept waiting to feel like I was drowning, but I didn't. I felt strangely alive. The morning of the shoot, I stood in front of the mirror in soft lighting, wearing a navy blouse and simple silver earrings. No flashy makeup. No theatrics. Just me. I walked onto the set. Sat in the chair. Took a deep breath. And when they asked, "What made you decide to share your story?" I looked into the lens, into every unseen eye behind it, and said, "Because I spent years being lied to in my own home. And the worst lie I ever told myself was that I didn't matter. But I do. And so do the women watching." The interviewer blinked. "What happened after you found out?" I smiled. Not with pride. With peace. I served them dinner. And then I served them the truth. The day the segment aired, I didn't tell anyone. Not Claire. Not the gallery staff. Not even the neighbors who now greeted me with soft, knowing glances when I watered my garden. I made myself a cup of Earl Grey, curled up in the chair by the front window, and watched the sunrise until the clock hit 8 a.m., the exact time my voice would beam across television screens in cities I'd never visited. When the credits rolled and the host welcomed viewers to second act women, I reached for the remote to turn the volume down. I couldn't bear to hear myself speak just yet. But I watched. They didn't edit much. My words remained sharp, steady. My pain wasn't softened with music or dramatics. It stood on its own. I spoke of Melissa without naming her. I spoke of Theo without bitterness. I described the dinner party, the envelopes, the betrayal behind candlelight, and how I had rebuilt myself, piece by piece. They showed glimpses of my photography. The iris bloom. The hands of an elderly woman holding a shovel in a garden. A wrinkled smile beneath a wide-brimmed hat. All images of women who had survived something, even if you didn't know what. And then, they closed the segment with a quote from my essay: "Sometimes the only way to reclaim your life is to let it burn, then plant something beautiful in the ash." By the time it ended, my phone was already buzzing. First Claire. Then the gallery. Then a number I didn't recognize. I silenced them all. Not because I didn't care. But because I needed the moment to be mine before it belonged to the world. Eventually, curiosity won out. I checked the messages. Claire's text: "You were perfect. Raw and dignified. I'm proud of you, Aunt Clara." So proud. The gallery: "We had a rush of visitors this morning. Several asked specifically for your work. We may need to reorder prints." The unknown number left a voicemail. A woman's voice, shaky. "Clara, I don't know if you'll listen to this, but thank you. I left my husband this morning. I watched your segment. I'd been living in silence for years, thinking I was alone. But hearing you, I just knew it was time. You gave me courage." I listened again. And again. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From understanding. From something deeper than pride. By the end of the day, the segment had been shared over 100,000 times. My inbox filled with messages. Women telling me their stories. Some heartbreaking. Some still unfolding. Many ending with the same line: "You helped me take my first step." And then came the message from Theo. A short email. Subject line: "Saw you." Message: "I deserved everything you said. I never realized how small I was until you stepped into the light. I'm sorry. I won't bother you again." I didn't reply. Not because I hated him. Because I didn't need to answer anymore. Melissa didn't reach out. Not a word. But I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she'd moved out of town, changed jobs, and shut down her social accounts. I imagined her watching the segment. Alone. Cold tea in her hands. Waiting for me to crumble. But I didn't crumble. I rose. The week ended with a call from the network's senior producer. "Clara," she said, "have you ever considered writing a book?" I blinked. "A book?" "Yes," she said. "You have a voice. And the world wants to hear more." I looked out my window at the garden blooming against the fence Melissa once tried to decorate with fairy lights. "I've considered a lot of things," I said. "Maybe it's time I consider that too." That night, I printed out the words I had written months ago. The ones I never thought anyone would read. I placed them on the table. Stacked them neatly. And opened a blank page. Because sometimes, the second act of your life begins when you finally stop letting other people write the first one. The morning began like any other. Quiet. Warm. Safe. I had just finished editing a new portrait series, women over 60 who had all come forward after seeing my segment, and was drafting an email to the publisher Fiona had connected me with. My life, for once, felt fully mine. Then the doorbell rang. Not a knock this time. A chime. I stood still for a long moment. No one had rung my bell in weeks. The people who mattered to me used the back gate. This ring felt deliberate. When I opened the door, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. but because of how predictable it was. Melissa. She looked nothing like the woman I remembered. Her clothes were loose. Her hair unwashed. No makeup. Her expression wasn't smug or apologetic, it was desperate. "Clara," she said, voice hoarse. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't move. Everyone's turned on me. I lost my job. My sister won't take me in. My name is mud in every place I used to walk tall. You destroyed me. I raised an eyebrow. I destroyed you? Her voice cracked. You know what I mean. No, Melissa. I really don't. Please, explain to me how exposing the truth is worse than committing the lie. I didn't mean for any of it to go that far, she said. I didn't want to fall in love with Theo. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't fall in love, I said flatly. You fell into convenience. You saw something you wanted. And you took it. That's not love. That's theft. She sat down on the porch steps, like her legs finally gave out. I don't know who I am anymore. And there it was. Not remorse. Not apology. Just collapse. The unraveling of a woman who had built herself on mirrors and found they were all cracked. I used to feel powerful, she whispered. When I was in your house, when I sat at your table. I thought, maybe this could be mine. Maybe I deserved what you had. I stepped outside and sat across from her, keeping my voice level. You didn't want what I had. You wanted the appearance of it. The comfort, the respect, the security. But none of that comes without loyalty. And you've never had any. Tears welled in her eyes. Please, she said. Isn't there anything left between us? Anything at all? I looked at her, really looked. This was a woman who had laughed in my kitchen while plotting to erase me. Who had shared my secrets, worn my scarves, and texted my husband from the guest room she pretended to sleep in alone. She wasn't some villain out of a novel. She was just small. And I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. No, I said. There's nothing left. Not because I hate you. But because I finally love myself too much to leave the door open for you again. She stood slowly, wiping her face with the sleeve of her coat. So that's it? You're just done? I was done the moment you walked out of my house and never looked back. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it. She hesitated, as if expecting me to change my mind at the last second. I didn't. She walked down the path, out through the gate, and into the gray morning mist. I never saw her again. And I never looked for her. Later that evening, I wrote the final chapter of the essay that would become the opening of my book. I titled it When the Storm Knocks Again. Because people will always come back when they think your door is still open. But healing means learning when to lock it, and walk away without guilt. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who wrote a book. For decades, I was the woman who read books, silently, in the bath or under the covers late at night while Theo snored beside me. I escaped into other people's stories because I believed mine was too ordinary to be told. But betrayal has a strange way of sharpening your voice. It takes the silence you've swallowed for years and turns it into something loud, something shaped like survival. Something shaped like truth. And now here I was, sitting in my garden, my laptop open on the table, the final sentence blinking on the screen. I had written it all. From the night I found Melissa's message. To the dinner where I exposed them both. To the rebirth that came after the fire. I hadn't spared myself. I included the parts where I doubted. Where I wanted to forgive. Where I was tempted to believe the lie that I'd somehow let it happen. I included the rage, the shaking hands, the nights I curled up on the bathroom floor wondering if I'd wasted my life. Because that's what truth requires, showing your worst angles along with your strongest stance. The publisher had already read the early chapters and sent back one note: this is not a story about betrayal. This is a story about rebirth. Don't stop now. So I didn't. I wrote the last sentence slowly, like sealing a letter to the woman I used to be. You survived what tried to break you, not by forgetting it, but by becoming someone it could never touch again. I hit save and closed the laptop. Not for applause. Not for money. But because I had finally said everything. Later that afternoon, I printed the manuscript and held it in my hands. 300 pages. My life between two covers. I walked it to the mailbox and slid it in, watching the red flag rise. It felt like setting down a heavy suitcase I'd been carrying for far too long. That evening, I poured myself a glass of red wine and walked through the house, touching the walls like they were old friends. This home, once haunted with betrayal, now held only truth. It echoed with music again. It smelled like lavender again. It was mine again. I passed by the mirror in the hallway and stopped. The woman looking back at me wasn't timid. She wasn't hollow. She wasn't waiting to be chosen. She was chosen. By herself. For the first time in decades, I liked the woman in the glass. I liked that she wasn't a victim anymore. I liked that she was no longer the woman who handed out spare keys to her soul. She had locked the doors that needed to stay shut. And she had thrown open the windows to a new kind of future. Tomorrow, I would start planning the gallery's spring exhibit. Next week, I'd review the book cover drafts. But tonight? Tonight, I would sit under the stars with no ghosts in my garden. Just peace. And maybe, finally, joy. The book was released on a Tuesday. No grand party. No glittering lights or velvet ropes. Just a quiet email from the publisher that said, "It's live." I stared at the message on my screen for a long moment. Then I clicked the link. There it was, my name on a cover, beneath the title I had whispered to myself for months, The Dinner I Didn't Eat. Simple. Honest. A story that had lived inside my bones finally laid bare for the world. Claire called minutes later. It's already trending. I didn't understand what that meant, not fully. Until I opened my messages. Hundreds. Then thousands. Emails. Comments. Direct messages from strangers, women in Arkansas, Ohio, New Zealand, France. They used different words, different languages, different names, but the pain? It was the same. My husband left me for my cousin. I thought it was my fault. I was betrayed by my sister and my partner. Your story gave me strength. I read your book in one sitting. Then I packed my bags. Each message was a scar carried quietly. Now they were naming them. Claiming them. And in some small way, healing through mine. I received an invitation to speak at a women's summit in Chicago. A request from a university professor who wanted to teach the book in her Modern Female Memoirs course. An email from a therapist asking for permission to quote certain pages during sessions with her clients. And then came the unexpected. A letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, a note in trembling script, I was the other woman. Not with your husband, but with someone else's. I never thought about the wife. I never saw her. Until I read your story. Now I can't stop seeing her face in everything. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know, you opened my eyes. I folded the letter slowly. Placed it in the back of the book's first edition, like a bookmark for the truth. People often say, you never know who's listening. But now I did. It wasn't just women like me. It was women like her. The ones on the other side of betrayal. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger toward her. I felt clarity. The launch week ended with an interview on a popular podcast, Voices Reclaimed. The host, a kind woman named Eliza, asked me, "What does healing look like now?" After everything? I paused before answering. Healing, I said, looks like letting the truth walk freely in your house again. It looks like planting new roots in the places others tried to poison. It looks like building a life no one can steal. When the interview ended, she asked if there would be a second book. I hadn't planned on one. But maybe. There was still more to say. That night, I hosted a quiet dinner. Just Claire, my neighbor Ruth, the gallery curator, and a few women who had reached out after reading the book, each with her own story of betrayal and survival. We raised our glasses in a toast to the women they underestimated. And then we ate. Laughed. Exhaled. It was the first dinner I'd hosted since that night. And this time, no one was pretending. By the end of spring, I was no longer the woman who sat quietly in the background of her own life. The gallery's Women in Light exhibit had become a traveling showcase. My book was now in its third printing. I had just signed a small deal with a production company interested in adapting the story into a limited series. And yet, despite the noise around me, my world felt quiet. In the good way. No more checking phones for hidden messages. No more forced dinners. No more pretending to be happy just to keep someone else comfortable. I had built something that felt like a new home, inside and out. That was when the letter arrived. It wasn't from Melissa. It wasn't from Theo. It was from someone I hadn't thought of in years. Theo's mother. Janine. She and I had once been close. Not in the sitcom mother-in-law way. But real. She liked that I didn't fuss. That I listened more than I talked. When she got sick a few years back, I was the one who sat at her bedside when Theo got too busy. I thought she loved me. But after the divorce, after the exposure, she vanished. No calls. No words. Silence. The envelope was thin. The handwriting shaky. Dear Clara, I don't expect you to read this. But if you are, thank you. Thank you for being strong when I was too ashamed to stand by you. Theo lied to you. That's true. But he also lied to me. He told me you left him. That you'd given up. That you'd embarrassed the family. And I believed him. I didn't want to, but I did. Then I saw your interview. And I finally saw the woman I always knew you were. The woman who saved my son from himself so many times. The woman he didn't deserve. I'm sorry I didn't defend you. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to reach out sooner. If you ever want to see me, even just for coffee, I'd like to apologize in person. With respect, Janine Reed. I read the letter twice. It didn't hurt like I thought it might. It didn't stir up the betrayal or the pain. It felt more like finding a long-lost photograph at the bottom of a drawer, something once precious, now faded, but still real. That weekend, I drove to the care home where she now lived. She greeted me in the lobby with a walker and trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears the second she saw me. You look stronger, she said softly. I am. We sat for 2 hours in the courtyard, sipping watered-down lemonade. She apologized again. She told me Theo had sent her a copy of the book, thinking she'd be outraged. Instead, she'd read it 3 times and cried through every chapter. You wrote what most women are too afraid to admit, she said. You didn't just survive. You turned it into something. I had to, I told her. Otherwise, it would have consumed me. Before I left, she placed a small envelope in my hand. Inside was a photograph. It was from years ago, me and Theo, on our anniversary, standing on the pier near Martha's Vineyard. But in the corner, barely noticeable, was something else. Melissa. Standing just a few feet behind us. Looking at him. Not me. It was the smallest proof of what I already knew, that the seeds had been planted long before they bloomed into betrayal. I almost threw the photo away. But then I tucked it inside my journal. Not to dwell on it, but to remind myself how far I'd come. That night, I added a final piece to my studio wall, a photo of my own hand gripping the edge of a broken plate, sharp and jagged. Below it, I scrawled a single caption, even what cuts you can be used to create. It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. No stamps. Hand-delivered, most likely slipped into my mailbox when no one was watching. Just my name written in sharp black ink across the front. Inside was a letter. From Theo. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first. Fed the birds in the garden. Answered a message from the gallery. Only after the sun had passed its peak did I sit in the reading chair, Theo's old one, now reupholstered in fabric that had nothing to do with him, and slid open the envelope with a letter opener I once used on anniversary cards. The handwriting was unmistakable. Clara, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know I lost that the moment I chose lies over loyalty, and silence over confession. I've watched from a distance as your story has grown into something powerful, something more honest than I ever managed to be in our entire marriage. I don't write this to ask for forgiveness. I wouldn't dare. But I wanted you to know that I've read your book. Every word. And I recognized myself in it, not just in the betrayal, but in the moments before. The good ones. The real ones. And I think that's what hurts most. Because those moments were real. At least, they were for me. And I think, maybe, I destroyed the only thing in my life that was ever truly good. Melissa and I are no longer in contact. It ended after the dinner. You know why? You exposed us both, but you also freed us both. Me from my cowardice. Her from her delusions. And yourself, from all of it. There's not a day that goes by that I don't wish I'd told you the truth first. Not to keep you. But because you earned that much. If you ever find it in your heart to say goodbye properly, I'd like to do that with dignity. If not, I understand. You were the best part of my life. I was the worst part of yours. Theo, I let the letter rest in my lap for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. The words didn't pierce me the way they might have months ago. Because I wasn't that woman anymore. His words, though laced with regret, came too late, and not for redemption. But for release. I thought about writing back. One sentence, you don't deserve a final word. Or, some silences are sacred. But instead, I folded the letter neatly. I tucked it between the pages of my unpublished second book draft, the one about starting over after you've already begun again. Not to keep it as a memento, but as a lesson. A reminder that closure isn't something you wait for. It's something you give yourself. The next morning, I donated the last item I still owned from our marriage, a wooden box Theo had given me on our 10th anniversary. He told me it was for keeping secrets. I had once filled it with letters, cards, and tiny tokens of our years together. Now, it was empty. And I liked it better that way. I walked back home with nothing in my hands, and everything in my heart. When I returned to my studio, I found Claire waiting with fresh flowers and a smile that said she knew something was coming. They confirmed it, she said. What? Your book. National tour. 10 cities. Panels, talks, and one major keynote in New York. You're officially booked. I stood there, stunned. Not because it was happening. But because I was finally ready. The world was asking for more of my voice. And this time I wasn't going to whisper. Before I begin this last part of my story, I want to ask you, have you ever been betrayed by someone who smiled in your face? Have you ever rebuilt your life using only pieces they left behind? Tell me where you're from in the comments. And if this story reached a piece of your heart, please like, share, and subscribe my channel. It helps stories like mine reach the ones still stuck in silence. Now, let me tell you how it all ended. It wasn't a grand ballroom. It wasn't marble floors and chandeliers. It was a small theater in Manhattan, packed wall to wall with women, some leaning forward in their seats, others clutching tissues they hadn't planned to use. They came from all over. Ohio. Louisiana. Canada. Even Australia. They had read my book. Heard the podcast. Watched the segment. And now, they were here to listen. I stepped onto the stage in a simple black dress. No dramatic makeup. No teleprompter. Just me. And the silence before the truth. A single spotlight followed me to the podium. I took a breath and began. Not long ago, I was the woman who smiled through a dinner party while knowing the two people I loved most were betraying me. Heads nodded. Shoulders tensed. I served them food with one hand and vengeance with the other. But I didn't do it to hurt them. Pause. I did it to find myself again. The theater was so quiet, I could hear someone's breath hitch in the third row. I lost myself in that house. In that marriage. In that friendship. I made myself smaller every day just to make someone else feel big. Until one day, I was barely there at all. I didn't cry. I didn't falter. Because I wasn't speaking from a wound anymore. I was speaking from a scar. I wrote my story thinking no one would care. That maybe it was too personal. Too specific. But what I've learned since is this: the most personal stories are the ones that bind us together. Betrayal wears different faces. But the healing? It begins in the same place. 1,000 eyes watched me. Not as a victim. But as proof. I ended the speech with the words I had written in the final chapter of my book: we do not rise from pain by forgetting it. We rise by walking through it and saying, this didn't kill me, but it did change me. And I am no longer who I was. They stood. They clapped. Some wept openly. And I smiled, not because I needed their applause. But because I had finally become the woman I always was beneath the pretending. That night, back in my hotel room, I stood at the window overlooking the city lights and whispered, it's over now. Not just the marriage. Not just the betrayal. But the silence. Because I told the story they never thought I'd tell. I named the things they hoped would stay buried. And I lit a fire with every lie they left behind. And now, somewhere out there, another woman, just like I once was, is reading my words in her quiet kitchen, hearing her own voice echo back. And maybe, just maybe, she's starting to believe she matters too. The END. Thank you for joining Clara's journey. Where are you watching from? If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe my channel so more women can reclaim their voices.